When my wife and I first moved into Willow Creek Estates, we thought we had found paradise. The houses were immaculate, the streets pristine, and the neighbors friendly. Everything looked picture perfect, almost like a scene from a suburban dream. But what we didn't know was that our dream home came with a hidden nightmare, one that watched us from above. The first few weeks in our new home were wonderful. We met friendly neighbors, enjoyed community events, and felt a sense of security. The HOA had strict rules, but we figured they were just to keep the neighborhood looking nice. As long as we followed them, we thought, everything would be fine. Then one evening, as I was sitting on my back patio enjoying a quiet night, I noticed something strange. A small, blinking red light moved slowly across the sky, hovering just above the rooftops. At first, I thought it was just a hobbyist's drone, maybe a kid playing around. But over the next few nights, I saw it again and again. Curious, I mentioned it to my neighbor Greg, an older man who had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade. He gave me a knowing look and leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Son, that's no kid's toy," he said. "That's the HOA's drone." I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but Greg wasn't laughing. "They've been using it for over a year now," he continued. "They say it's for security reasons, but that thing's always watching. It records everything." I thought about it later that night, and the more I considered it, the more uneasy I felt. Was the HOA really using drones to spy on homeowners? And if so, why? A few days later, I got my answer in the form of a bright yellow envelope taped to my front door. Violation notice. Failure to store trash bins properly. I was baffled. I always brought my trash bins in as soon as the garbage truck came. I double-checked my security cameras, and sure enough, I had brought them in within 20 minutes of pickup. How could the HOA possibly know if they had been out too long? That's when it hit me. The drone. I remembered seeing it hovering around that morning. Could it have been watching me? I wasn't sure, but I had a growing suspicion that Greg had been right. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules, they were monitoring us. I decided to test my theory. That night, I left my garden hose slightly uncoiled on the lawn, a technical violation, according to the HOA's strict rules. Sure enough, 2 days later, another yellow envelope appeared on my door. Violation notice, improper yard maintenance. There was no way anyone could have seen the hose unless they had been specifically looking for it. I checked my cameras again. No one had walked past my house. No one had driven by and slowed down. The only thing that had been around was the drone. That was all the confirmation I needed. I knew I couldn't be the only one experiencing this. I started talking to my neighbors, casually bringing up the drone to see how they reacted. Some dismissed it as a harmless security measure, but others, like Greg, were convinced something more sinister was at play. One woman, Maria, told me she had been fined for leaving her patio umbrella open overnight. Another neighbor, Jason, said he was cited for having his car parked in his driveway for more than 3 hours, something that was never an issue before the drone appeared. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. The HOA wasn't just using the drone for security. They were actively hunting for violations to fine homeowners and increase revenue. I decided to take action. I wasn't sure what I was going to do just yet, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't sit back and let the HOA watch us like prisoners in our own homes. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. If the HOA was willing to go this far just to enforce minor rules, what else were they capable of? I started paying closer attention, looking for any evidence that could confirm my worst fears. And I didn't have to wait long. One evening, I noticed the drone hovering outside Greg's house, moving slowly along his backyard fence before disappearing into the night. Greg was a quiet man, always following the rules, but the HOA still found reasons to harass him. The next morning, he had a yellow envelope taped to his door. I caught up with him later that day, and he shook his head in frustration. They fined me for having my garden lights on past 10 o'clock. Can you believe that? The situation was getting out of hand. I decided to install a high-powered zoom lens on my home security cameras, hoping to catch a closer look at the drone. A week later, I finally got the footage I needed. The drone had the HOA's logo stamped on its side. There was no more doubt. The HOA was officially running a surveillance operation on its own residents. Armed with proof, I called a secret meeting with a few trusted neighbors. We gathered in Jason's garage late one evening, away from prying eyes. I showed them the footage, and the anger in the room was palpable. Maria crossed her arms. "This is insane. They have no right to do this." Jason agreed. "This isn't about security. They're using this to trap us, to make money off of us." We knew we had to act, but how? The HOA controlled the neighborhood, and they had the authority to fine and harass anyone who stepped out of line. We needed a plan, something that would expose them on a grand scale. Greg, the most cautious among us, suggested we start small, tracking every drone sighting, logging each fine that followed, and building a solid case. We formed a network, each of us keeping a watchful eye on the skies and reporting every drone flight we spotted. Over the next 2 weeks, we noticed a pattern. The drone followed the same routes every night, hovering over certain houses longer than others. Those houses were always the ones that received fines the next day. With this new information, we took things a step further. Jason managed to get his hands on a radio frequency scanner, and after some trial and error, we were able to track the drone signal. To our shock, it was being controlled from a small office near the HOA's headquarters. This was no amateur setup. It was a fully funded operation, but the real bombshell came when Maria, who worked in IT, managed to intercept some of the drone's footage. The HOA was storing everything: recordings of private backyards, footage of families in their own homes, even children playing outside. It was beyond invasive. It was illegal. We had all the proof we needed. Now it was time to take action. But as we were planning our next steps, the HOA made its boldest move yet. One night, as I was reviewing the latest footage, a black SUV pulled up in front of my house. 2 men in suits stepped out and approached my door. My heart pounded as I opened it. One of them, a tall man with a sharp gaze, handed me an envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter from the HOA's legal team, warning me to stop my so-called false accusations or face legal consequences. They knew we were onto them, and they were trying to shut us down before we could go public. I felt a mix of fear and determination. They thought they could intimidate us, but they had no idea just how far we were willing to go. I looked at my neighbors that night, all of us standing together, and I knew we weren't backing down. The fight had just begun. We knew the HOA was watching us, but now they knew we were watching them too. The cease and desist letter was meant to scare us into silence, but instead, it only fueled our determination. The moment they tried to intimidate us was the moment we realized we were getting too close to the truth. That night, we gathered again at Jason's garage, our nerves on edge, but our resolve stronger than ever. Maria spread out all the documents and videos we had collected so far. "We have enough evidence to take them down," she said firmly. "The question is, how do we make it public without them finding a way to cover it up?" Jason leaned in, tapping his fingers against the table. "We need media attention. If we take this to local news, the HOA won't be able to bury it." Greg, however, wasn't so sure. What if they have connections? What if they try to spin the story? We needed a plan that wouldn't just expose the HOA, but would ensure they couldn't manipulate the narrative. Maria had an idea. What if we leak the footage online? If it spreads fast enough, they won't be able to stop it. It was a risky move. The HOA had power, but the internet had something they didn't: speed. Once something went viral, there was no containing it. That night, we edited together a video compilation showing drone footage of private homes, families in their backyards, and the systematic way they targeted specific households for fines. Maria uploaded it anonymously to multiple platforms, ensuring that even if one link got taken down, others would still spread. Within hours, the video started gaining traction. By the next morning, it had exploded. Local news stations picked up the story. Reporters began showing up at Willow Creek Estates, interviewing frustrated homeowners who had been victims of the HOA's relentless surveillance. People were outraged. The HOA tried to issue a statement claiming the drones were for security purposes, but no one was buying it. Under pressure, city officials announced an investigation. It seemed like we had won. But then something unexpected happened. One by one, our group members started receiving violations. Absurd ones. Maria got fined for having her porch light on too late. Jason received a notice claiming his mailbox was 1 inch too high. Greg was cited for having a small crack in his driveway. I wasn't spared either. The HOA sent me an official warning that my car had been parked in my own driveway for too long. It was retaliation, and it was coming fast. We decided to fight back in a way they wouldn't expect. If they wanted to play dirty, we would use their own rules against them. Jason, who had spent years working in corporate compliance, combed through the HOA's own bylaws. And that's when we found the loophole. According to their regulations, any amendment to surveillance policies required a vote by homeowners. Not only had they never held a vote, but they had actively hidden the drone program from the residents. Armed with this, we sent a formal request to nullify all drone-related violations and demand a full community vote on whether the drones should be allowed at all. The HOA tried to stall, but with the media and city officials now involved, they had no choice but to comply. The vote was scheduled for the following week, and it would decide whether the HOA could continue their surveillance or if we would finally put an end to it. As the day of the vote approached, tensions in the neighborhood were at an all-time high. Some residents still supported the HOA, believing their claims that the drones kept the community safe. Others, fed up with the constant fines and invasion of privacy, were ready to see the program shut down for good. The night before the vote, we gathered one last time, preparing for the final showdown. The day of the vote arrived, and the tension in the air was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Homeowners gathered at the community center, some standing in anxious clusters, others whispering about what might happen if the HOA managed to keep control. The board members sat at the front, stone-faced, trying to appear confident, but I could see the unease in their eyes. They knew they had lost control of the narrative. A representative from the city council was present to oversee the process and ensure fairness. The room was packed, nearly every resident of Willow Creek Estates attending, and for once it wasn't because they had been forced to by some arbitrary HOA rule. People were here because they wanted change. They wanted justice. The board tried one last time to defend their surveillance program, giving a prepared speech about how the drones were necessary for neighborhood security. But their words rang hollow. The damage had already been done. The leaked footage had shown the truth. This wasn't about security. It was about control. It was about using fear and intimidation to keep homeowners in check while the board profited from excessive fines. When it was our turn to speak, we didn't need fancy speeches. The evidence spoke for itself. Maria played a final clip on a projector, a montage of drone footage capturing residents in their most private moments. Conversations on back porches, children playing in their yards, homeowners simply trying to enjoy their lives in peace. The silence in the room was deafening. The HOA had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. The vote was cast by secret ballot. Every homeowner had the right to decide whether the drone program would be permanently shut down and whether new leadership would be put in place. The tension as we waited for the count was unbearable. But when the results were announced, the room erupted into cheers. An overwhelming majority had voted to abolish the surveillance program. But that wasn't all. A second vote had been held, one that the HOA hadn't planned for, one to remove the board members responsible for the entire operation. It wasn't even close. The community had spoken. The corrupt leaders were officially out. The HOA had been defeated. In the following weeks, changes swept through the neighborhood. The drones were deactivated. Their operations shut down for good. Fines that had been unfairly issued were refunded, and the entire system was overhauled. A new HOA board was elected, one that truly represented the interests of the community instead of preying upon it. It was strange at first, waking up and not feeling watched, stepping outside without checking the skies for the small, buzzing intruder. But soon life in Willow Creek Estates became what it should have been all along. A neighborhood, not a prison. A community, not a surveillance state. We had won. We had taken back our homes. And most importantly, we had proven that even in the face of intimidation and fear, when people stand together, they can fight back. Looking back, I realized this was never just about drones. It was about power, about who truly controls a community, the people who live there or the ones who seek to rule over them. Our fight was over, but our lesson remained clear. Never let anyone take away your right to privacy, your right to peace, or your right to call your home your own. Because at the end of the day, our homes are not just buildings. They are our sanctuaries. And no one, no HOA, no authority, no self-appointed ruler has the right to take that away from us.